At exactly 2:48 in the morning, a phone call shattered the silence of Dubai's most exclusive hotel. "My wife's not breathing." Daniel Carter's voice trembled through the receiver, each word cracking with desperation. Within minutes, paramedics were racing through the marble corridors of the Azure Crown Hotel, their footsteps echoing off walls that had witnessed countless honeymoon celebrations. But this wasn't a celebration. 23-year-old Priya Reddy lay motionless in the king-size bed of their luxury suite, her dark hair spread across silk pillowcases like spilled ink. No signs of struggle, no drugs in her system, no suicide note. Just a young bride who had gone to sleep and never woken up. By sunrise, she was pronounced dead. Dubai authorities initially treated it as a tragic medical emergency, a sudden, inexplicable loss that would haunt a grieving husband forever. But what Daniel discovered in Priya's phone 3 days later would transform this honeymoon tragedy into something far more sinister. Something that would leave seasoned investigators speechless. Have you ever felt like someone was watching you, even when you thought you were safe? Tell us in the comments, because Priya's story proves that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we should fear most. 3 months earlier, Priya Reddy had stood in her childhood bedroom in Visakhapatnam, staring at the wedding invitation that would change everything. Gold-embossed Sanskrit characters announced her upcoming marriage to Daniel Carter, a name that still felt foreign on her tongue, yet somehow right in her heart. She was the first woman in her family to study abroad, the first to fall in love with a stranger from another continent, and now, the first to marry outside their tight-knit community. At 23, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had tasted freedom and refused to give it back. Her journey to independence hadn't been easy. Growing up under the watchful eyes of 3 generations, Priya learned early that family expectations were heavier than her grandmother's gold jewelry. Her father, a retired businessman with traditional values, had mapped out her life before she could walk. Arranged marriage, dutiful wife, respectful daughter-in-law. But Toronto changed everything. The marketing internship at a downtown firm was supposed to be temporary, a brief adventure before settling into the life her family had chosen. Instead, it became her escape hatch to a world where women could make their own decisions, where love wasn't negotiated in family meetings. That's where she met Daniel Carter on a crisp October afternoon at a cafe near the harborfront. He was sketching building designs while eating butter chicken with the concentration of a man solving complex equations. When she laughed at his technique, using naan bread like a spoon, he looked up with the kind of smile that made strangers feel like old friends. "I'm clearly doing this wrong," he admitted, his cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Completely wrong," she agreed, sliding into the seat across from him. "Let me show you." What began as an impromptu lesson in Indian cuisine evolved into 2 years of cross-cultural discovery. Daniel, a 29-year-old architect with steady hands and patient eyes, became fascinated by more than just Indian street food. He learned Telugu phrases to surprise her, studied her favorite Bollywood films, and listened with genuine curiosity when she shared stories of her homeland. Priya, in turn, discovered the quiet joy of Canadian winters, learned to appreciate hockey, and found herself falling for a man who loved her ambition as much as her smile. When Daniel proposed on the CN Tower's observation deck, with a ring that incorporated a tiny ruby her grandmother had given her, Priya said yes without hesitation. But calling home with the news felt like stepping into a battlefield. A foreigner? Her father's voice carried across continents, heavy with disappointment. "Priya, what about our customs? Our traditions?" "He respects our traditions, Papa. He's learning our language. Our..." "Learning?" Her uncle Raghav's voice cut through the background, sharp and dismissive. "A few words don't make him one of us." The wedding planning became a delicate dance between 2 cultures, 2 sets of expectations, and 2 very different definitions of love. Daniel's parents, Sarah and Robert Carter, flew in from Vancouver bearing gifts and genuine warmth. They learned basic Telugu greetings, participated in every ceremony with respectful enthusiasm, and treated Priya like the daughter they'd never had. Priya's family welcomed Daniel with polite smiles and careful conversations, but beneath the surface, tensions simmered. Her cousins whispered about mixing cultures, Her aunts worried about what people would say. And Uncle Raghav, her late mother's brother who controlled the family's export business, watched every interaction with calculating eyes. "Don't worry about the expenses," Raghav had offered one evening, his voice smooth as silk. "I'll handle everything. The venue, the decorations, the reception. Consider it my gift to my beloved niece." At the time, his generosity felt overwhelming. Later, it would acquire a much darker meaning. The wedding itself was a spectacle of gold and red, traditional music and nervous laughter. Priya looked radiant in her mother's wedding sari, while Daniel navigated Sanskrit vows with the determination of a man crossing a cultural bridge. But even in their happiest moments, she felt the weight of watching eyes, heard the whispered conversations that stopped when she approached. "She thinks she's too good for us now," one cousin muttered during the reception. "Marrying a foreigner changes people," another agreed. "Makes them forget where they come from." But Priya hadn't forgotten. She'd simply chosen to build something new. Their honeymoon to Dubai was meant to be a fresh start, a glamorous city that belonged to neither East nor West, where they could exist as simply husband and wife. The Azure Crown Hotel overlooking Jumeirah Beach became their sanctuary of marble and glass, where room service arrived on silver trays and the ocean stretched endlessly toward home. For 4 perfect days, they explored desert dunes and ancient souks, took selfies with matching sunglasses, and laughed at the awkwardness of new marriage. The photos from those early days showed pure joy, 2 people discovering each other in a place that felt suspended between worlds. But on the 5th day, the watching eyes found them again. The first sign of trouble arrived disguised as concern. On their 4th morning in Dubai, Priya's phone buzzed with a call from home. Uncle Raghav's name flashed across the screen, and she answered with the dutiful tone she'd perfected over decades of family calls. "Uncle, how are you?" "Priya, beta, I'm worried about you." His voice carried that familiar mix of affection and authority that had shaped her childhood. "Dubai can be dangerous for young couples. Where exactly are you staying?" The question struck her as odd. She'd mentioned the hotel name during their pre-wedding conversations, but she provided the details anyway. "The Azure Crown, overlooking Jumeirah Beach, Suite 2247. Good. And Daniel is treating you well? You're being careful?" "Of course, Uncle. We're perfectly safe." But after hanging up, Priya felt unsettled. Something in his tone, too interested, too specific, lingered like an unpleasant taste. By afternoon, he'd called twice more. Same questions, same concerns, same request for their exact location. "Why does he keep asking where we're staying?" Daniel wondered aloud as they prepared for dinner. Priya forced a smile. "He worries. Indian families are like that." But her stomach twisted with each ring of the phone. That evening, as they returned from dinner at the hotel's rooftop restaurant, the concierge approached them with professional courtesy. "Excuse me, Mr. and Mrs. Carter? A gentleman stopped by earlier claiming to be Mrs. Carter's cousin. He was asking about your suite number, but our policy prevents us from sharing guest information without prior authorization." Priya's blood chilled. What did he look like? Indian gentleman, perhaps 45 years old, well-dressed. He seemed quite concerned about reaching you, said it was a family emergency. Daniel glanced at his wife. "Do you have any cousins in Dubai?" "No," Priya whispered. "None." They thanked the concierge and hurried to their suite, but the evening's magic had evaporated. Priya double-checked the locks, drew the curtains tighter, and spent an hour scrolling through her contacts, trying to place the mysterious visitor. Sleep came fitfully that night, interrupted by shadows that might have been dreams or memories of watching eyes. The next morning brought another call from Uncle Raghav. "I heard from a family friend that you might be having some troubles," he said, his voice carrying across continents with practiced concern. "Is everything all right?" "What troubles? We're fine, Uncle." Good. But if anything happens, anything at all, you know you can call me." Family takes care of family, beta. After the call, Priya stepped onto their balcony overlooking the glittering Dubai skyline. When she returned 20 minutes later, her expression had changed completely. "I need some air," she announced, grabbing her purse. "I'm going for a walk." Daniel looked up from his book. "Want company?" "No, I need to think." She'd never taken a solo walk since arriving in Dubai. They'd done everything together, explored the gold souk hand in hand, shared shisha at beachside cafes, marveled at the Burj Khalifa's lights. Her sudden need for solitude felt foreign, almost alarming. She returned an hour later, pale and distracted. "Everything okay?" Daniel asked. "Just tired," she murmured, but her hands shook as she poured herself a glass of water. That afternoon, while Daniel showered, a hotel employee knocked on their door. He wore the standard cleaning uniform and carried what appeared to be a small package. "Delivery for Mrs. Carter," he said politely. "From whom?" "A family member, I believe. Someone left it at the front desk." The package was unremarkable. Brown paper, no return address, about the size of a jewelry box. Priya accepted it with trembling hands, but when Daniel emerged from the bathroom, she'd already tucked it away. "What was that?" he asked. "Nothing important, just something from home." But nothing felt unimportant anymore. Every phone call, every knock at the door, every shadow in the hallway carried weight. Priya moved through their final day like someone walking through water. Slow, careful, constantly looking over her shoulder. That evening, she complained of dizziness during dinner. "Maybe it's the heat," Daniel suggested, "or jet lag catching up." "Maybe," she agreed, but her voice sounded hollow. Back in their suite, she made herself a cup of chamomile tea, something to help with the persistent headache that had plagued her all day. She'd packed sleep medication for the time change, and after checking the dosage twice, she took her usual pill. "I'm going to bed early," she told Daniel, kissing his forehead with lips that felt cold. "This headache is killing me." He watched her settle under the covers, noting how small she looked in the king-sized bed, how her breathing seemed more labored than usual. "Want me to call a doctor?" "No, I just need sleep. Tomorrow we're going home." Those were the last words Priya Reddy would ever speak. What would you do if your family opposed your marriage choice? Have you ever felt pressured to choose between love and family expectations? Share your story in the comments. Because sometimes the greatest battles are fought closest to home. For 3 days after Priya's death, Daniel existed in a fog of grief and disbelief. Dubai authorities had ruled her death a tragic medical emergency. A young woman whose heart simply stopped for reasons that remained medically inexplicable. No signs of violence, no evidence of foul play, just a devastating loss that would haunt him forever. Sleep became impossible. Food tasted like cardboard. The luxury suite that had witnessed their laughter now felt like a mausoleum. And Daniel found himself clinging to the only connection he had left to his wife. Her phone. Hour after hour, he scrolled through their photos, reliving every moment of their brief marriage. The selfies from the wedding, the candid shots from Toronto, the honeymoon pictures that had ended so abruptly. He read their text conversations, studied her social media posts, searching for some clue, some explanation for why a healthy 23-year-old had simply stopped breathing. It was during one of these marathon sessions, at 3 a.m. on the 4th night, that Daniel discovered something that changed everything. Hidden in Priya's drafts folder was an unsent email addressed to herself, dated just hours before her death. His hands trembled as he opened it. "If something happens to me, it won't be an accident. I think my uncle is watching us. He called 3 times today asking where we're staying. The man at the hotel, I think it was him. I recognized his voice when the concierge described him. I don't know what he wants, but I'm scared. The package today? I should have never opened it. There was a note inside. Come home or face the consequences. I can't tell Daniel. He wouldn't understand the family dynamics. But if something happens to me, please know that Raghav uncle has been threatening me for months about the Mumbai property. He says I'm betraying the family by planning to sell my share. I'm not betraying anyone. I just want to build my own life. Please, if you're reading this, don't let him get away with it. I love you, Daniel. I'm sorry I couldn't be stronger." Daniel's vision blurred as he read the message twice, then a third time. The cheerful, confident woman he'd married had been terrified, and he'd been completely oblivious. While he'd been admiring Dubai's skyline, his wife had been planning for her own potential death. With shaking hands, he screenshotted the email and immediately called the Dubai police. Detective Sarah Al-Mansouri arrived within an hour, a sharp-eyed investigator who had seen enough family tragedies to recognize the signs of premeditated murder. She read Priya's draft email with the focused intensity of someone assembling a puzzle. "This changes everything," she said quietly. "We need to treat this as a homicide investigation." Within hours, the Azure Crown Hotel became a crime scene. What had been dismissed as routine medical emergency was now scrutinized with forensic precision. The first breakthrough came from hotel records. Al-Mansouri discovered that their suite had been accessed twice on the night of Priya's death. Once by legitimate cleaning staff at 11 p.m. and again at 2:15 a.m. using a staff override key. "Who authorized the second entry?" she demanded from the hotel manager. "No one," he replied, pale-faced. "We have no record of any maintenance or service calls after midnight." Security footage revealed a figure in cleaning uniform accessing their floor at 2:10 a.m., 15 minutes before the unauthorized key access. The person's face was obscured by the uniform cap, but their build and gait suggested a middle-aged man, approximately 5'8" with a slight limp. More disturbing was what they found during interviews with hotel staff. The concierge who had described Priya's mysterious cousin provided additional details. The man had specifically asked about the couple's daily routines, their meal times, when they typically returned to their room. He seemed very interested in their schedule, the concierge recalled. Said he wanted to surprise them, but something felt off about his questions. A housekeeping supervisor remembered something even more chilling. An Indian man had approached one of the cleaners that afternoon, offering money for information about the couple in suite 2247. The cleaner, a Filipino woman supporting family back home, had initially refused. But when the man mentioned it was family business and increased his offer to $500, she reluctantly agreed to deliver a package to their floor. "I thought it was just family drama," she sobbed during questioning. He said his niece was being stubborn and needed to understand family responsibilities. I never imagined. The package had contained more than threats. When investigators finally located the discarded wrapping in the hotel's dumpster, they found traces of a substance that made their blood run cold. Forensic analysis revealed microscopic residues of midazolam, a powerful sedative that, in small doses, causes drowsiness and confusion. In larger doses, especially when combined with other medications, it can cause respiratory depression and cardiac arrest. But the most damning evidence was yet to come. Dubai police contacted international authorities to investigate Raghav Reddy. What they discovered painted a picture of calculated malice that stunned even seasoned investigators. Flight records showed that Raghav had purchased tickets to Dubai under a false name, Raj Sharma, arriving 2 days before Priya's death and departing the morning after. Immigration footage captured him at Dubai International Airport wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, but facial recognition software confirmed his identity with 97% certainty. Financial records revealed a $10,000 transfer to a known intermediary, a man who specialized in discrete problem solving and had connections throughout the Middle East. When authorities tracked down this intermediary, he initially denied involvement, but eventually admitted to facilitating a family intervention for a client. He said his niece was dishonoring the family and needed to be brought back to India, the intermediary confessed. He never said anything about permanently stopping her. But perhaps the most chilling evidence was found in Priya's tea mug, discovered untouched beside her bed. Laboratory analysis detected traces of midazolam, not enough to kill her alone, but deadly when combined with the prescription sleep medication she'd taken for jet lag. The killer hadn't acted impulsively. This was a carefully orchestrated murder, planned with the precision of someone who understood both her routines and her vulnerabilities. As Detective Al-Mansouri assembled the evidence, one question haunted her. How had a family dispute escalated to premeditated murder on foreign soil? The answer lay buried in family secrets that reached back generations, secrets that would shock even Daniel, who thought he'd known the woman he'd married. While Dubai investigators pieced together the mechanics of murder, authorities in India were uncovering a web of family betrayal that stretched back decades. Raghav Reddy wasn't just Priya's concerned uncle. He was the controlling patriarch of a family empire built on manipulation, intimidation, and absolute obedience. For 25 years, he had managed the Reddy family's import-export business, but more importantly, he controlled the inheritance left by Priya's mother, who had died in a car accident when Priya was only 8 years old. What Daniel had never known, what Priya had never fully understood, was that her mother had left her a substantial inheritance, including majority ownership of a prime commercial property in Mumbai's Bandra district. The property, currently valued at nearly 15 crore rupees, approximately $2 million, generated significant rental income that Raghav had been managing on Priya's behalf. Managing, in this case, meant keeping the profits for himself while telling Priya the property was barely breaking even. The truth emerged through financial investigators who specialized in family fraud cases. Raghav had been systematically embezzling from Priya's inheritance for over a decade, using the rental income to expand his own business ventures, while providing his niece with minimal statements showing fictional maintenance costs and fabricated tax burdens. But 6 months before her death, Priya had started asking uncomfortable questions. The investigation revealed a trail of increasingly desperate communications between uncle and niece. Text messages recovered from Priya's cloud backup painted a picture of growing suspicion and family tension. Priya, March 15. Uncle, I've been thinking about Mom's property. Maybe it's time I took a more active role in managing it. Raghav, March 15. Beta, these things are complicated. Better to let experienced hands handle business matters. Priya, I spoke with a property lawyer in Mumbai. He says rental yields in Bandra have increased 40% in 5 years. How is our property losing money? Lawyers don't understand ground realities. Old buildings have many hidden costs. I want to see the actual rental agreements and expense reports, not summaries. The originals. Why this sudden distrust? Family doesn't question family. The messages grew increasingly hostile as Priya pressed for transparency. By May, she had hired an independent accountant in Mumbai to audit the property's finances. By June, she knew the truth. Her uncle had stolen approximately 3.5 crore rupees over 10 years. But the real catalyst for murder wasn't just discovered theft. It was Priya's plan for the future. Hidden in her laptop, investigators found detailed business proposals for a marketing consultancy she planned to launch with Daniel after their honeymoon. The startup capital would come from selling her share of the Mumbai property, giving her complete financial independence from her family. Raghav had built his authority on controlling family finances. Priya's independence threatened not just his embezzlement scheme, but his entire power structure. Other family members might start asking questions about their own inheritances, their own business arrangements. More damning still were the recorded phone conversations. Indian authorities acting on a court order had tapped Raghav's phones during the final weeks of investigation. What they captured was a man slowly losing his grip on a situation spiraling beyond his control. In a call to his business partner 2 weeks before the Dubai trip, Raghav's voice carried barely controlled rage. She's forgotten who raised her, who paid for her education, who gave her everything. Now she wants to sell family property to fund some foreign husband's dreams? I won't allow it. What can you do? His partner asked. She's married now. Her husband will support her decisions. I'll handle it, Raghav replied. She needs to understand that family loyalty isn't optional. Some lessons can only be taught once. But perhaps the most chilling evidence came from Raghav's personal assistant, a young man named Vikram who had worked for the family for 3 years. Under police questioning, Vikram revealed conversations that painted a picture of premeditation stretching back months. Sir had been talking about teaching Priya Madam a lesson, Vikram confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. At first, I thought he meant cutting off her allowance or something, but after she announced her engagement, his anger became different. Different how? Darker, more personal. He said she had betrayed the family blood that ran in her veins. He said some betrayals could only be answered with permanent consequences. The most damning evidence came from Raghav's computer, seized during a raid on his Mumbai office. Deleted browser history, partially recovered by forensic specialists, showed extensive research into Dubai hotel security, Indian citizens traveling abroad, and substances that could mimic natural cardiac arrest. One particularly disturbing search query, made just 2 weeks before his Dubai flight, read, "Untraceable substances that cause heart failure in young women. Have you ever discovered a family member wasn't who you thought they were? Sometimes the people we trust most are hiding the darkest secrets." Share your experiences in the comments, because Priya's story shows that greed can turn family love into something unrecognizable. But even with overwhelming evidence of motive and planning, investigators still needed to prove how Raghav had accessed the hotel suite and administered the fatal dose. The answer would come from an unexpected source, and it would reveal the cold precision of a killer who had planned every detail except one crucial oversight. The breakthrough that would ultimately convict Raghav Reddy came from Daniel's sleepless hours studying photographs, specifically his growing obsession with documenting every detail of his final days with Priya. 5 days after her death, as he sat in their Dubai hotel suite waiting for her body to be released for repatriation, Daniel found himself scrolling through their honeymoon photos with the desperate focus of a man trying to hold on to disappearing memories. Each image felt precious now, proof that their happiness had been real, even if it had been doomed. That's when he noticed something that made his blood run cold. In every photo from their first 4 days in Dubai, Priya wore the same distinctive accessory, a red coral bracelet with intricate silver work that had belonged to her mother. She'd shown it to Daniel during their engagement, explaining how her mother had worn it every day until her death, how it had been passed down through 3 generations of Reddy women. "It's my connection to her," Priya had said, touching the bracelet reverently. "As long as I wear this, part of her is with me." She'd worn it to their wedding, throughout their Toronto honeymoon photos, and every single day in Dubai, until their final day. Daniel scrolled frantically through the last photos they'd taken together. There, in a selfie snapped just hours before her death, as they returned from dinner, the bracelet was gone. His hands shaking, Daniel immediately called Detective Al-Mansouri. "The bracelet," he stammered into the phone. "Priya's mother's bracelet. She never took it off, but it's missing in the last photos." "What bracelet?" Al-Mansouri's voice sharpened with professional interest. "Red coral with silver. She wore it everywhere. But in the photos from our last day, it's not there. She would never have removed it voluntarily." Within an hour, Al-Mansouri was searching the hotel suite with forensic technicians. They found the bracelet in the bathroom trash bin, deliberately broken into pieces and wrapped in tissue paper as if someone had tried to hide evidence of its destruction. But the bracelet held secrets its destroyer hadn't anticipated. DNA analysis revealed 2 distinct profiles on the broken coral beads. Priya's, as expected, and another that didn't match Daniel or any of the hotel staff who had been tested for elimination purposes. When Dubai police contacted Interpol to run the unknown profile through international databases, they found no matches. But they did find something equally valuable. The second DNA profile contained enough genetic markers to identify familial relationships. When compared against biological evidence from Priya's family members, the results were conclusive. The DNA belonged to a male blood relative, most likely a brother or uncle. More specifically, it belonged to someone who had handled the bracelet with enough force to leave skin cells on its sharp coral edges, someone who had gripped it tightly enough to break the silver wire that had held it together for generations. But DNA evidence alone wasn't enough for conviction. They needed proof that Raghav had actually been in the hotel room, not just that someone related to Priya had touched her bracelet at some point. The answer came from hotel security footage that investigators had initially dismissed as irrelevant. Dubai's Azure Crown Hotel employed a sophisticated security system with cameras in every hallway, elevator, and public area. But the cameras in guest room corridors were motion-activated, recording only when someone walked past, a feature designed to save storage space while maintaining security coverage. Initially, investigators had focused on obvious timeframes: when Daniel and Priya returned from dinner, when emergency services arrived, when hotel staff accessed the room. But Al-Mansouri decided to examine every single motion-activated recording from their floor during the final 48 hours. What she found changed everything. At 2:13 a.m. on the night of Priya's death, 35 minutes before Daniel's frantic call to reception, the hallway camera captured a figure in cleaning uniform approaching suite 2247. The person's face was obscured by shadows and the uniform cap, but their build matched the description of Priya's mysterious cousin from 2 days earlier. More importantly, the figure walked with a distinctive gait, favoring their left leg slightly, a subtle limp that became more pronounced under stress. When Dubai police contacted Mumbai authorities to obtain medical records for Raghav Reddy, they discovered he'd suffered a motorcycle accident in his 20s that had left him with a permanent left knee injury. An injury that caused the exact type of compensatory limp visible in the security footage. But the most damning evidence was still to come. Hotel keycard logs showed that Suite 2247 was accessed at 2:15 a.m. using a staff override code, 2 minutes after the limping figure appeared in the hallway. The override code belonged to a housekeeping supervisor named Maria Santos, who was interrogated immediately. Under questioning, Santos revealed she'd been approached by an Indian man the previous afternoon. He'd claimed to be Priya's uncle, said there was a family emergency, and offered her $1,000 to loan him her access card for just a few minutes that night. He said his niece was being influenced by her foreign husband, Santos sobbed. He said he needed to speak with her privately to make her understand family responsibilities. I thought it was just family drama. I never imagined. Santos had given him her card at 11 p.m. with instructions to return it by 3 a.m. The card was returned exactly on schedule, slipped under her door with an envelope containing the promised payment. But forensic analysis of the returned key card revealed traces of Priya's DNA on the magnetic strip, evidence that the card had been used in close proximity to her body. The final piece of evidence came from toxicology reports that had been overlooked during the initial investigation. While investigators had found traces of midazolam in Priya's tea mug, they discovered something even more telling in her bloodstream. The sedative had been administered in 2 separate doses approximately 6 hours apart. The first dose, found in her afternoon tea, had been relatively small, enough to cause drowsiness and confusion, but not life-threatening. This matched the timing of the mysterious package delivery and explained Priya's complaints of dizziness during dinner. The second dose, administered shortly before her death, had been much larger and delivered through a different method. Injection marks on her neck, initially attributed to emergency medical procedures, were actually from a hypodermic needle, and the injection site contained traces of midazolam in concentrations that would have caused immediate cardiac arrest in someone already sedated. Raghav hadn't just poisoned his niece, he had sedated her first to ensure she couldn't resist the fatal injection. When confronted with the overwhelming evidence, Raghav initially maintained his innocence. But when shown the security footage of his distinctive limp, the DNA evidence from the bracelet, and the injection marks on Priya's neck, his carefully constructed facade finally cracked. "She was destroying our family," he said quietly, his voice devoid of remorse. "She chose a stranger over her own blood. Some betrayals cannot be forgiven." Detective Al-Mansouri had investigated hundreds of murders, but the cold calculation of Raghav's confession left her speechless. This wasn't a crime of passion or sudden rage. It was a methodical execution, planned with the precision of someone who viewed family members as possessions to be controlled rather than people to be loved. The trial of Raghav Reddy began on a scorching Dubai morning, 6 months after Priya's death, in a courtroom that felt like the intersection of two worlds, much like the victim herself had been. Daniel sat in the front row each day, wearing a black suit that had become his uniform of grief, watching as prosecutors methodically dismantled the life of the man who had destroyed his future. Beside him sat Priya's father, Ravi Reddy, a broken man who had lost both his daughter and his faith in family bonds. The evidence presented was overwhelming. Dubai's prosecutor, Fatima Al-Zahra, laid out the case with clinical precision. Financial motive, premeditation, DNA evidence, security footage, and ultimately, confession. She painted a picture of a man so consumed with control that he'd chosen murder over losing his grip on family power. Raghav Reddy didn't just kill his niece, Alzara told the court during her opening statement. He executed her for the crime of choosing love over fear, independence over subservience. This was not a crime of passion, but a calculated assassination designed to send a message to his entire family. Defiance will not be tolerated. Raghav's defense attorney, a sharp-suited man from Mumbai, attempted to portray the killing as a family dispute that had spiraled beyond control. He argued that his client had only intended to sedate Priya and bring her back to India, but that something had gone tragically wrong with the dosage. The argument fell apart under cross-examination. Medical experts testified that the injection marks on Priya's neck showed deliberate precision. Someone with knowledge of human anatomy had targeted her carotid artery for maximum absorption of the lethal dose. The midazolam concentration in her bloodstream was nearly 10 times higher than necessary for sedation, indicating clear intent to kill rather than incapacitate. Perhaps most damning was testimony from Raghav's own assistant, Vikram, who had flown to Dubai to testify under witness protection. Sir had been researching methods of causing cardiac arrest for months, Vikram told the court, his voice barely audible. He showed me articles about substances that wouldn't show up in basic autopsies. He said modern medicine had made it easier to deal with family problems permanently. When asked why he hadn't reported his suspicions to police, Vikram broke down completely. In our world, you don't question family elders. You don't imagine they would. How do you report someone for researching murder when you can't believe they would actually commit it? The most emotional testimony came from Daniel himself, who took the stand on the trial's fourth day. Speaking in carefully measured words, he described the woman he'd married. Ambitious, loving, caught between two worlds, but determined to build something beautiful from their differences. Priya used to say that love was stronger than fear, Daniel told the court, his voice breaking. She believed that choosing your own path was worth any sacrifice. She died because she refused to live in fear of her own family. He described finding the draft email, the gradual realization that his wife had died terrified and alone, knowing her killer was approaching but too afraid to wake him for help. She protected me even in her final moments, Daniel continued. She could have screamed, could have fought back, but she let him kill her quietly rather than risk my safety. That's the kind of person she was, brave enough to die for love. On the witness stand, Raghav showed no remorse. When asked why he had killed his niece, his answer chilled the courtroom. She forgot her place in the family. She chose foreign money over Indian values. She would have corrupted the next generation, taught them that family loyalty was optional. I did what any responsible elder would do. You murdered a 23-year-old woman for falling in love, the prosecutor challenged. I protected our family from contamination, Raghav replied coldly. Sometimes protection requires difficult decisions. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty of premeditated murder in the first degree. Guilty of financial fraud spanning over a decade. Guilty of conspiracy to commit murder across international boundaries. Under Dubai's legal system, Raghav faced the possibility of execution. But in a decision that surprised many observers, the court sentenced him to life imprisonment without possibility of parole, citing the international nature of the case and diplomatic considerations with India. As the verdict was read, Raghav showed no emotion. But in the gallery, Priya's father wept openly. Tears of grief for his daughter and shame for his brother-in-law, who had destroyed their family's honor in the most unforgivable way. For Daniel, the verdict brought a hollow satisfaction. Justice had been served. But justice couldn't return his wife, or erase the knowledge that she had died afraid and alone in a luxury hotel room thousands of miles from home. After the trial, he returned to Toronto, to an apartment that still held traces of Priya's presence. Her books on the shelf, her coffee mug in the kitchen, her pictures on his phone that he couldn't bear to delete, but couldn't stop looking at. 6 months later, he received an unexpected letter from Mumbai. Priya's inheritance, the property that had cost her life, had been liquidated and transferred to a foundation established in her name. The Priya Reddy Foundation would provide scholarships for young Indian women seeking education abroad, helping them build the independent lives she had fought and died for. "It's what she would have wanted," her father wrote. She believed that freedom was worth fighting for. Now her fight continues through others. The foundation's first recipient was a young woman from Visakhapatnam, the same city where Priya had grown up dreaming of a bigger world. In her scholarship application, she wrote words that would have made Priya proud. "I want to prove that love is stronger than fear, that choosing your own path is worth any sacrifice. I want to build bridges between worlds, not walls." In Dubai, the Azure Crown Hotel removed Suite 2247 from active rental, converting it into a memorial space where victims of domestic violence could receive counseling and support. A small plaque by the door reads, "In memory of Priya Reddy, who chose love over fear." And in a federal prison outside Dubai, Raghav Reddy sits in a small cell, serving a life sentence for destroying the life he'd helped create. He will die behind bars, his family empire dissolved, his legacy nothing more than a cautionary tale about the price of trying to control what was never his to own. What do you think drives family members to such extremes? Have you ever witnessed control disguised as love, or tradition used as a weapon? Share your thoughts in the comments, because understanding these dynamics might help prevent another tragedy like Priya's. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones we should fear. Sometimes love requires the courage to break away from those who claim to love us. And sometimes the price of freedom is paid not by those who seek it, but by those who refuse to give it freely. Priya Reddy's story ended in tragedy, but her legacy lives on in every young woman who chooses independence over security, love over fear, and hope over the heavy weight of family expectations that were never meant to be chains.